Hello and welcome to episode 2 of our Chapter Law podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, somebody who's been within the industry for over 30 years, working within a estate agency and training the very best estate agents and law firms across the land. Today our guest is Cla Yates. Welcome, Clare.
Thank you very much, Nick. What an introduction.
You're very welcome. Clare, in our previous podcast, we talked about the educational side for sellers and buyers on the legal process. But today I want to focus on why sellers should instruct the solicitor at the very beginning of that process. Now, I know that's something that you've been talking about for quite some time on your training. But before we step into that, I think our viewers would like to know a little bit about you and a little bit of your background, if you don't mind sharing.
Okay, so as you quite rightly said, I originally started out as an estate agent in the property industry. I was a part-time weekender. I'm really old. Dinosaurs were selling houses to cavemen, and the Santander was originally the Abbey National, and I worked there before Ant and Dec took it over. So I made up building society books in the morning and then show people around property in the afternoon. I loved it. I quickly got the bug. And from a part-time estate agent went on to work full-time, and then doing both holiday cottages. I've worked in legal services. At one point, I think I delivered donuts to over 2,500 estate agency branches, working in panel management. And really for the last 20 years, I guess, I've been a freelance trainer consultant, and most recently keynote speaker at some of the bigger events. So yeah, love it.
Excellent. And you're too modest to share that you're also an award-winning trainer as well, aren't you?
Yes. Yes, I am.
And today we're going to talk about something that could genuinely change how we all work, and that's getting sellers legally prepared before a buyer is found. So, Claire, question for you. You've spoken recently about the bottlenecks in conveyancing. Where do you see the biggest delays happening right now?
Well, as you just rightly said, sellers aren't ready to sell when the buyer is found. There is a very strange process that estate agents have kind of almost perpetuated, which is we don't want sellers to feel that they're obligated to move. In other words, that they could do a speculative move. And that was fine 40 years ago, but that practice is now seriously holding everybody back. So we're in a situation now where sellers think by no sell, no fee, they don't need to instruct a solicitor either. And when the buyer comes along, there's at least 3 to 4 and sometimes 5 weeks work just to get the seller actually in a position to tell the buyer a little bit about the house they're buying. Now, it ends up that the buyer has to spend quite a bit of money just discovering what they're actually buying. And I nickname that the kimono moment, where eventually they sort of say, okay, here's £300, now show me what you've got. But that actually is really imbalanced, and it's making everybody quite resentful. I don't really understand why we need to perpetuate this. We just need to be grown-ups and say to sellers, we can save you 3 to 5 weeks on selling your house if you instruct a solicitor when you go on the market with an estate agent. And I believe that most committed sellers, when you give them that compelling reason, would say, of course I would. It will only be those that are saying, oh, maybe I will and maybe I won't, that wouldn't go ahead with it. But most people who come and see an estate agent want to be somewhere else. And so speeding that journey up would be important to them.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. It's interesting, in episode 1 of our podcast, I actually touched on that we know statistically, nationally, that it can take up to 3 weeks for a seller to actually instruct a conveyancer. And by what I mean by that is actually pay money on account. And then a further 2 weeks to fill out the paperwork, which can be quite onerous and time consuming. And that 3 to 5 weeks back will make a massive difference to what is a very long, protracted transaction time from the moment a memo of sale has been agreed and written to the solicitors to exchange of contracts, which again nationally is 16 to 22 weeks. When we look at estate agents, do you think the industry's almost been trained sellers to think, I'll deal with this later?
I actually think we don't discuss it with them at all. I think that we are so keen to win an instruction and we don't have that conversation because we think it might put them off if they actually have to invest in the process earlier than maybe they thought they would. And we don't like having difficult conversations with people that we want to do business with. So I think what we have to do as estate agents is recognise that a no sell, no fee process, we rely on transactions going through quickly, and we really need more transactions to go through than not. Now, the crazy thing is there's a direct relationship between the speed of a transaction and the likelihood of it going through. So actually, we're shooting ourselves in the foot by not having this conversation or educating our sellers on why they should instruct solicitors when they go on the market. And if you speak to most lawyers, they will actually say they try and keep the cost low for a seller to do that initial instruction and get the forms done because they recognise that it could be a deterrent. So it doesn't need to be a huge investment by the seller, but the very action of instructing solicitors early is also a great indication to a motivated buyer that the seller is interested in selling. So it's got loads of advantages, and apart from a small upfront cost, hardly any disadvantages. We just need to educate.
So what we're talking of is a sale-ready solution at the end of the day. So define to me what does that mean to you?
I think that the seller should have filled in the forms and made it clear that they own the property, that they own the property that's being described in the details that the agent provides to clients. The boundaries have been established. We know exactly what the land registry says about the ownership of the property and if there's a lease or any covenants or anything else, whether it's listed. So all of that information is freely available for the buyer to check. And the material upfront information that we've been talking about a lot, and I know the government is really keen to see, starts to talk about things that are really helpful, like broadband speed and sewage and how water gets to the property and what legal rights anybody might have over your land. This is stuff that's seriously important to the buyer, but also can hold things up if it comes out later on, because sometimes there's remedial work that needs to be done to a property to make it possible to transfer. Maybe they've bought a piece of land at the bottom and those two pieces of land have not been amalgamated. And so there's actually two transactions for the buyer instead of one. So the forward-thinking solicitor actually says, look, to an estate agent, before you even go and list that, why don't we have a quick look and see how easy this property is going to be to sell? And then you can actually have a conversation with the owner and say, actually, when the buyer comes along, we're still going to be a few weeks behind, so let's start now. And I just think it makes sense.
So you alluded to it. If you're an estate agent, it's almost the fear of putting a barrier in the way to get that instruction. But if we look at it from a seller's perspective, if you've got 3 estate agents and actually one comes out and has that conversation with you, how would you feel as the seller? Which direction would you go to? Which person would you trust the most?
The agent that's done their research. The agent that's actually looked at what they're coming to see and actually says, I've had a little look here on land registry and I've looked at the plan. And you've said your garden goes down to the edge of that hedge, but in reality on the plan there's something missing here. And that could be straight away an indication that we may need to do some work on this. So it's just thinking ahead, because that problem can be a major obstacle later down the line and cause the buyer to panic, but also additional costs that people haven't budgeted for. So we never used to have as much of this information available to us back in the day, but we really do now, and we should be using that to work smarter with our clients and help them to make the move that they've spent so long thinking about happen quicker and more likely to happen.
What kind of documents would a seller expect to complete at this stage, Claire?
Well, again, I think this is something that they're possibly mystified about. So for many lawyers, they have actually digitised or used the Law Society digital forms. In other words, the TA6 most people might be familiar with. It's the property information form that tells the lawyer what's being sold or what the owner believes that they are actually selling. Now, there's still an awful lot of people that think they should fill this in on paper form rather than digitally and get quite nervous when they see it's a digital form. But actually, the digital form is amazing because it has explanations. If you hover your mouse over them, it will explain in plain English what the legal question in jargon means. It will skip questions where you've answered a particular one, no or yes, so you're not being constantly posed questions that aren't relevant to your property. And it can be done really quickly. And the lawyers are used to people not being able to answer every question, so they can go back and fill in the gaps with their clients subsequently once it's returned. But there are cautious people. It's funny, I get a lot of agents that talk about old people, and I've realised that I'm potentially one of those people. And they say, can you print the forms out for me? If we print the forms out, it's half a tree. It's about at least 26 pages of legal jargon that terrify even the most determined seller. And so they tend to do a bit like I do. They'll go and reach for a glass of wine and go and put these forms on the microwave and go back and look at them again and again. And then they lose them and they ask for another set. And then they ask if they can come in to fill them in. So we need to make this process easier. We need to accept the fact that there's a lot of forms to fill in, that there's some ID, which is important because we're keeping them safe and we're keeping ourselves safe. We need to check that they're obviously not some drug dealer with the AML and all that kind of stuff. But we just need to simplify stuff so that people are not frightened by not legislation so much as the administration. They're not frightened by the documents that are facing them, that they just see them as okay, and there are people I can call to fill in. So we take the mystery out of them, stop making them difficult, and help people to fill them in. We could do so much with these. Mm.
Yeah, if you're the estate agent in the living room, this is actually a real positive message to convey. But by being sale ready, you've said to me you want to move and you want to move by such and such a time. This is certainly something that will make a huge difference. And it just doesn't benefit the seller, of course. It's also impacting other parties in the chain. The buyer's solicitor, this documentation is ready, available once an offer has been agreed. The seller's solicitor is ready to go to forward these documents to the buyer.
There is one other aspect as well from an estate agent point of view. The estate agent, under the consumer protection regulations, can only make factual statements about property. It's really important that the factual statements that they make are backed up by documents that support that from the seller. And the estate agent relies on the seller to be truthful. If we don't get the forms filled in, the estate agent unwittingly could be misdescribing a property in a way that could actually risk them from a compliance perspective. So from everybody's point of view, let's stop making it a kimono moment, which is 6 or 8 weeks down the line. And let's make it straight away. You want to see what you're buying in the same way that if you buy a car, in the same way if you buy anything else, you know exactly what you're buying from the start. You may not know how long it's going to take to buy it. That's going to be a while yet. But the other thing that's worrying with this, Nick, is that the average consumer, according to Landmark, actually thinks it takes 8 weeks from sale agreed to exchange of contracts. And we're way adrift of that. I think we're into 120-something days as an average. So we're going to disappoint even the most determined sellers and buyers if we told them the truth. But we could say that we're more likely to hit a reasonable target if they start to embrace this and get on board early. So let's make the invisible visible, and let's make the impossible possible, and we can do it.
I have a very good story to tell on that, Claire, and it's only come to light today.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
So I was out on I support our referring network of estate agents, and I went out on a valuation with one of our referrers, and I was very kindly introduced as Nick from Chapter Law, and he's going to tell you about conveyancing. And I'm like, ooh, no, I'm not a qualified conveyancer, but I educated the seller on the process and the time that it takes to get to where you want to get to. And these guys wanted to be moved out by Christmas time, and this was a challenging time if you use 16 to 22 weeks. So after a really good valuation and a conversation around the process, the following day the estate agent was instructed, happy days, he's won. But the following day after that, Chapter Law were instructed by the seller, and we had everything ready. And this was around about the 12th or 13th of August. And as of the 13th of October, it exchanged, or 6th of October, it exchanged contracts. And on the 13th of October, completed.
Wow.
So it's 56 days or 8 weeks from start to finish. So a brilliant example of getting sale ready right there. Okay, we talked a lot about agents and their communication with their sellers, but I do think some of this also sits with the conveyancer, the solicitor as well. So from your training work, where does communication typically break down between the conveyancer and the seller, do you feel?
That's a really interesting one. It's about managing expectations and setting expectations. It's really interesting that when lots of people talk about they want to go and see their solicitor without realising that actually there is no physical need to see a lawyer anymore, that the lawyer can do pretty much everything and allow the customer time to read through documents in their privacy of their own home. They don't need to put their Sunday best on to go and listen to technical jargon that they don't understand. But I think that most customers want to know when will they hear from their solicitor, and I think it's really good for conveyancers to make a weekly check-in call and say, you know, what's a good day for you? Why don't we speak on a Thursday and put that time in? I think that's important. We have Zoom now, so where we have multiple parties involved in, say, a probate case or something like that, that we can have a number of people on one call. That's really powerful. But I think we just need to set the boundaries and say, when's a good time to speak? Be respectful of people's time. Some people are frustrated. They've waited all day to hear from their lawyer, and then the lawyer speaks to them just as they're collecting their kids from school, or they're in Sainsbury's and they're going, oh, no, I can't speak to them. So I think it's just treating people with respect, setting the rules for communication, and not using things like I'll call you when I can, or I'll call you later in the week. It has to be a little bit kinder than that and say, so we would normally not hear too much in the first couple of weeks, but after that we'll start to speak more regularly. And establish with the clients whether they prefer to have email to support things. Some people have got hearing difficulties. Some people may have other requirements that we have to respect. So I think it's always worthwhile just setting the boundaries from the word go as to what good communication looks like from both the lawyer and the client.
Claire, we know that moving home is arguably one of the most stressful things that you can do. So by moving the dial to sale ready, what difference do you think this makes psychologically to feel ahead of the curve for a seller?
Oh, I love this one. So everybody who comes to see an estate agent in the first place wants to be somewhere else. It's a bit like going to a travel agent. And what you're deciding is where is your destination. Now, some people, it's a physical destination, it's another property. And for some people, it's just freedom from thinking about the house that they want to leave finally. We do deal with death, divorce and debt. So we have to be mindful that some people just want to be free from anxiety and worry. Some people just want to be free from the unhappy relationship that they've got. But whatever happens, we need to make sure that they get there. So let's talk about the holiday and let's talk about the destination. There is no better moment than when you get the confirmation of your holiday booking, explaining how you're going to get there, the date of your transfer, who's going to be arranging your transfers, in other words, where you're going to be picked up and how you're going to be taken. So when we do sale ready, we're starting to set the journey for them and they're beginning to see the preparation. And as we get closer, we start talking about what's going to happen when they land in their chosen destination. So just seller prepared is a bit like your airline ticket saying it's being printed. We're dealing with eye-watering sums of money and a roof over people's heads, people's homes. It's emotional. People are not rational and they're not as understanding as they could be. If you add to that there is no certainty and no timescale that they can rely upon for that whole thing to take place, it is not surprising that people become difficult, irrational, and in some cases start to kick off. It's so important that conveyancers and estate agents understand the emotional state that people are in. and try and do as much as they can to listen to their clients and reassure them. People are not being difficult. People are not demanding. They're distressed and anxious because they need to know where are they going to be living in the next 6 weeks, 6 months. So we have to be mindful that, huge sums of money, a roof over people's heads, that's an emotional tinderbox, and people will kick off from time to time.
I want to touch on now how, as a seller, how would a seller choose the right solicitor for them? Could you give our viewers any advice?
Absolutely, I could. So this is one area where we do not want to cut costs. So the top line figure that you see on a solicitor's quote is normally their legal fee or their time. So I'm just going to say to you quite simply that the lower that fee, the less time they've allocated for you. But also the lower the fee, the more cases they have to take on to earn the same as a solicitor further down the road. So let's take that holiday analogy, shall we? So you want to go from A to B. You have a choice of getting on a bus with 70 other customers, all of whom want to get off at different destinations, and you're going to have to wait all that time to get to your hotel, when you could hire a minibus with less customers. All you have to do is pay more. So there is no logic in trying to save money on legal fees. You need to choose a solicitor that keeps their caseload low, charges a fair fee, and make sure that all of the charges are listed so you don't get a nasty surprise at the end, or you have to give them an enormous tip just for getting you there. So make sure that you look at the fee and think about the fact that this is the guy or the individual, shall we say, that's going to make sure you make a wise purchase and that you can live in your house the way you want to in the future, and also that you can say goodbye and never have to return to the place you want to be away from. So let's not waste money. Let's spend money on the right things and take time to find out their experience, what their current caseload is, how many people will be helping you, and what they will do when they go on holiday, and can they make sure that they understand exactly why you're moving and how they're going to help you. It's important.
And on your travels up and down the country, in your training role, you're not just looking at estate agents, you're also talking to lawyers. Again, for our viewers, listeners today, what does great look like between relationships with the estate agent, the solicitor and the consumer?
They work as partners. They've got the same customer and they're both involved in helping that customer move. So they understand that the experience that they give their customer impacts on the other stakeholders. So instead of seeing each other as adversaries, they see a way of collaborating. So to both of them making sure that the customer hears two professionals working together with the same mission to help them move from A to B.
That's excellent advice, Claire. So if I could just summarise a few of Claire's top tips. One is to get the paperwork together, the proof of ID, title deeds, warranties, etc. at the very beginning of the process. Talk to the estate agent about being sale ready and what that means. Instruct the conveyancer at the point of time that you instruct your estate agent. And tell your buyer that you're legally ready. It builds trust and it speeds everything up. So a lot of consumers choose their solicitor or their estate agent by looking at online reviews. Now, we know that online reviews can be potentially very positive, but there is always the occasional negative in there. And what we discover in our world is that some of those negative reviews are from people who aren't even customers of the law firm or the estate agent. How would you advise a seller or a buyer to choose their conveyancer?
Okay, so there's a couple of things. First of all, I want most people to be really, really honest with themselves about reviews. Most of us only complete reviews for businesses we've been blown away by and so impressed that we have to give them a 5-star review, or we're utterly disappointed and we give another review there. But the number of reviews that are actually given based on most caseloads, and this is for restaurants and hotels and everything else, is probably only about 10% of clients are actually leaving reviews at all. which means it's a very, very distorted and unreliable thing. And then on top of that, and we all know this from also hotel reviews and other reviews, that sometimes these people aren't even clients. They've just posed or positioned or been negative in a way to detract from a law firm or an estate agent's performance. I would say to people, go and talk to your agent about why they are so keen for you to use a lawyer. And maybe even offer a proper living testimonial, because actually there are some clients that are happy enough to do a video testimonial to say, I've used this lawyer and they're brilliant. I would also be very mindful that even if you go onto Google and say, how can I choose my conveyancer? The guidelines are extremely difficult. And in my view, only estate agents who deal with lawyers every day have got a really good handle on who's great with their clients and who gets the job done and who communicates really well. So trust your estate agent, not only with your front door key and your burglar alarm code, but to help choose the professionals that are going to help you with your move.
You just said something really, really important there. That's trusting. As a seller, I'm going to trust you, the estate agent, with my front door key and my burglar alarm code. How long does it take for that seller to make that decision? It's the space of 45 minutes in evaluation.
Yeah.
That's frightening.
It is. It is.
So it's so important for that seller to actually potentially do some mystery shopping as well, or seeking friends' advice, any testimonials.
Yes, because the estate agent is going to send around strangers to your house and all sorts of things. So you need to be very happy with your choice of professional. But having made that decision, let the estate agent help you to choose the other professionals, because actually you need 3 people to help you move. You need an estate agent, many people need a mortgage advisor, and you need a conveyancer. Get them to work as a team and you've got a really happy move, and probably a faster one.
Claire, thanks so much. That's absolutely brilliant insights. So if you're thinking of selling, I think the lesson here today is get sale ready, instruct your estate agent and instruct your solicitor at the same time to get this sale moving as quickly as possible. And you too then will see the results of a transaction that could halve the time of the national average at this moment in time, which is 16 to 22 weeks. Thanks for listening. This has been our second podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll look out for episode 3 coming very soon. Thank you.